clock had just struck midnight, but in Pinebrook, time had a different meaning. On the outskirts of town, at an old, abandoned train station, a strange ritual had been unfolding for years. No one knew why. No one could explain it. But every morning, like clockwork, a dog would appear at the tracks, alone. And he would wait. This wasn't just any dog. His name was Rusty. And no matter the weather, no matter the season, he waited. He waited for someone he loved. But the twist? That someone wasn't who you'd expect. And no one could fathom why he was still here, waiting. After all these years, could it really be that a dog could keep a promise? At first glance, Rusty seemed like any other dog. A bit of gray around the muzzle, eyes slightly dimmed with age, but still strong and proud. His posture was one of unwavering loyalty. But if you looked closer, you could see something else. Something deeper. The kind of thing that only the most loyal of animals possess, a purpose. And that purpose was to wait. The townsfolks would gossip. They would exchange theories over coffee in the diner, or while watching the town's slow pace from their porches. But nobody truly understood the weight of Rusty's daily ritual. Not until one fateful day, local one, elderly man, shaking his head in disbelief. You know, I've lived in this town for over 60 years, and I've never seen a dog like that. Used to belong to Walter. Remember him? Old Walter who ran the hardware store? He passed away nearly a decade ago. But Rusty? He still comes down to the station every day. Local 2 elderly woman nodding in agreement. Yeah, I heard Walter said the dog never left his side in the hospital. Right up until the end. Maybe it's just the dog's way of grieving. You know, animals do that, right? Local 3 young woman scoffing lightly. Grieving? Please. Dogs don't understand time. It's just a habit. The poor thing probably doesn't even know Walter's gone. The townsfolk believed they had it figured out. Rusty was simply mourning. A dog that couldn't let go. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that this wasn't just about memory. It wasn't even just about loss. Rusty was keeping a promise. A promise made long before anyone even thought to question his routine. As the morning sun began to rise over Pinebrook, Rusty remained perfectly still, his gaze fixed, his body poised, his routine unshakable. He had done this for 20 years. Every day, for 20 years, at the exact same time, he would wait for the train that never came. But today was different. Today, the air was heavy with something unfamiliar. A strange tension. Rusty could feel it. His ears twitched. His nostrils flared. His heart, though old, began to beat with renewed purpose. Something was coming. Something he'd been waiting for longer than he even realized. For 20 years, Rusty had waited alone, convinced that one day, his loyalty would be rewarded. Some mornings, the wind would howl as if to mock him. Other days, the stillness would settle into his bones, weighing down his spirit. But every single day he returned. And today, there was an unmistakable sensation. Today, the impossible was about to happen. The train station that had been silent for so long, the tracks that had not seen a train in years, were about to come alive again. The tracks were old, worn down by time and the elements. The station, forgotten. But today something was different. Something that even time couldn't erase. Rusty wasn't just waiting for the train. He was waiting for the return of something or someone who had once been a part of this very station. This was not just any dog, and this was not just any station. As the sun broke the horizon, casting light across the abandoned tracks, Rusty stood at attention. His body remained rigid, unyielding. He was waiting for a promise kept long ago, a promise to return. The kind of promise that could only come from a bond that defied time itself. But no one knew why. No one knew who or what Rusty was waiting for. And that was the real mystery. Rusty's story wasn't just about loss. It was about loyalty, about love, about waiting for something that only he understood. And as the town of Pinebrook began to stir, oblivious to the dog on the platform, Rusty waited. He always waited, but what was coming would change everything. The truth behind his loyalty, behind his daily vigil, was about to be revealed, and it was far stranger than anyone could ever imagine. But the truth was more complicated than any of them could have guessed. Rusty's story would soon change everything. Not just for him, not just for Pinebrook, but for the very idea of loyalty itself. And the mystery of the dog at the train station? It was only just beginning. It's easy to forget the past when it's buried beneath layers of time. Pinebrook had been quiet for years, its secrets tucked away in the corners of the town's history. But some secrets refused to stay hidden. And this Rusty knew better than anyone. Something was coming. The morning was still. The air was thick with anticipation. And Rusty was waiting. He always waited. But there was something in his bones now, a vibration in the air that told him today was different. This wasn't just any morning. The train hadn't come in years, but somehow, Rusty felt that it would today. He was certain of it. The dog stood, unmoving, as if the very world around him had paused in reverence. His eyes scanned the horizon, and his paws itched to move, but he remained perfectly still. He knew something that no one else did. Rusty wasn't just waiting for a train. He was waiting for a moment that, in his heart, he knew was destined to come. It was hard to say when it had started. The waiting, the routine had become so ingrained, so familiar, that even Rusty wasn't sure when the train station first became his daily vigil. But what he did know deep down was that it wasn't about the train. Not anymore. It wasn't about the trains that hadn't arrived in decades. It was about the promise that had been made to him. Pinebrook had seen better days, that much was true. The once bustling railroad had faded into obscurity, and most folks had long since forgotten the significance of the old station. They went about their lives, oblivious to the strange figure who appeared every morning at the crack of dawn. A dog, waiting for a train that never came. But there were those who hadn't forgotten, those who still remembered Rusty's owner, Walter, the old man who had run the hardware store all those years ago. Walter had been a fixture in Pinebrook, a man of few words but immense character. His bond with Rusty had been the stuff of local legend, a story that had been whispered about for years. And when Walter passed away, so did the memory of why Rusty kept coming to the station, why he still waited. The station was a ghost of its former self. The tracks were choked with weeds, the wooden platform decaying, the ticket booth long abandoned. But as the wind picked up, something strange happened. A small scrap of paper, old and yellowed with age, was swept from beneath a pile of dust. It landed by Rusty's paws. Without thinking, Rusty bent down to sniff it, nudging it gently with his nose. It wasn't much, just a faded piece of a newspaper. But in that moment, Rusty knew that this was the beginning of something bigger, something that had been set into motion long ago. He had to go to it. He had to find out what this meant. But what could a dog do with a faded scrap of paper? Was it a clue? A message? Or was it just a forgotten relic of the past? Rusty wasn't sure, but somehow he knew it held the key. The dog's instincts had always been sharp. He knew when something was wrong, when something was off. And now, with this paper in his mouth, he moved with a sense of urgency he had never felt before. His path was clear, to find out what had been hidden for so long, to find out why he had been waiting for all these years. But there was something else. A sense of fear had begun to settle in, a fear that was as old as the memories of his owner, Walter. Walter had been a part of the town's history, and the story that Rusty was uncovering now was something that threatened to unravel everything the townsfolk thought they knew about their quiet little town. It didn't take long for Rusty to find himself standing at the door of the Pinebrook Historical Society. His eyes flicked nervously from side to side. He had no idea what he was looking for, only that he had to be there. Inside, an old woman named Mrs. Cartwright, the town historian, sat at her desk, thumbing through a dusty ledger. She had known Walter, had known all the townsfolk, and she had heard the stories about Rusty, the stories that were just myths, or so everyone thought. Emerus Cartwright, gravelly voice. Rusty, you old mutt. What are you doing here? She chuckled, but Rusty only stared at her, his mouth gently opening as he dropped the crumpled piece of paper on the floor before her. Mrs. Cartwright frowned, picking it up with trembling hands. She stared at the old paper for a moment, and then her eyes widened in shock. Emerus Cartwright, whispering, Walter, it's him. It's Walter. The old historian's face grew pale as she turned the pages of the journal. She had seen the story before, but never like this. The page was filled with Walter's handwritten notes. Notes about promises made, about a pact with his loyal dog Rusty. And then, at the very bottom of the page, something stood out. A date. May 17th. The day Walter had made a promise that would change everything. The promise that had kept Rusty at that train station for all these years. But the question remained. What exactly had Walter promised? What was so important that it had kept a dog coming back to an abandoned station, year after year, waiting for a train that never arrived? The mystery was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Rusty, the dog who had waited for so long, was about to uncover something that would shake Pinebrook to its core. And no one, not even the town historian, could have predicted what it would be. Mrs. Cartwright's hands trembled as she studied the old piece of paper Rusty had brought to her. It wasn't just a scrap. No, this was something far more important. Something that had been buried under layers of time and forgotten history. The truth was buried in the folds of this simple, yellowed paper. And now the time had come to uncover it. But what was the truth? And why was it tied to Walter? And more importantly, why had Rusty kept waiting for something that no one else could see or understand? In the corner of the office, Mrs. Cartwright pulled out a collection of letters, each one yellowed with age. They had been written by Walter, long before he had passed away. She had read them once when she was young. But now, looking at them again, she saw something different, something she had missed before. These letters, she realized, were Walter's legacy. They were his way of explaining the unexplainable, of justifying the years of waiting, of why Rusty kept vigil at the station day after day. It wasn't just some eccentricity. It wasn't just an old man's whimsical dream. These letters contained a story that had been waiting to be told for far too long. Mrs. Cartwright flipped open the first letter and began to read aloud. The promise I made to Rusty was simple, but it has weighed on me all these years. I have told no one, but I can no longer keep this secret. It is too important, and I fear I may not live long enough to fulfill it. When the train arrives, Rusty will know what to do. He has waited for so long, and when the time comes, he will lead us to the truth, to the place where our past began, to the place where the station first became our home. I hope this makes sense to someone, even if that someone is just Rusty. The letter's meaning was clear, and yet it made little sense. Walter had written these words in haste, but they were full of meaning. What did Rusty know? What train was Walter talking about? And what was this place where their past began? Mrs. Cartwright felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the magnitude of the secret Walter had hidden. It was no longer just about a dog waiting for a train. This was something much bigger, something that stretched back years, decades even. It wasn't long before Mrs. Cartwright decided to dig deeper. She couldn't just sit idly by. The town's history had been carefully documented for generations, and it was time to see what had been left out, what had been forgotten. She sifted through the dusty pages of Pinebrook's records, her mind racing. But it wasn't until she stumbled upon an old photograph, yellowed with age, that everything clicked. In the photo, there was the old train station, not in its current state of ruin, but vibrant and alive with people bustling around it. And standing in front of the station, she saw someone she recognized, Walter. But there was something else in that photograph that stopped her cold. A man, standing next to Walter, with a look on his face that wasn't familiar. A stranger, someone who didn't belong in Pinebrook. And yet he was there in the very heart of the town's history. Mrs. Cartwright's heart pounded in her chest. Who was this man? Why had Walter kept him hidden from everyone? And what was his connection to the train station? She turned the photo over, revealing a name scribbled in fading ink. Tommy Weaver. The name Tommy Weaver had no meaning to her. It wasn't in any of the town's records. No one had ever spoken of him. And yet, there he was, a shadow in Pinebrook's history, a key to understanding the mystery Rusty had been guarding all these years. There were still so many questions. Who was Tommy Weaver? Why had Walter kept him a secret? And what was the connection between this mysterious man, the station, and Rusty's promise? As Mrs. Cartwright dug deeper into the mystery, Rusty continued his daily vigil, oblivious to the answers that were beginning to surface. He had his own role to play in this unfolding story. He had his own part to fulfill. But even Rusty, with all his loyalty and unwavering determination, couldn't have known what was about to happen next. Something had changed. The whistle, that sound, it had been years since anyone had heard it. Rusty's eyes widened as he stood up, his body trembling with excitement. The train was coming. The promise was about to be fulfilled. But as the train approached, the truth was finally within reach. And with it, the mystery of Tommy Weaver, the secret that had been buried for decades, was about to reveal itself. The train was coming. But what would it bring? Answers? Secrets? Or something far more dangerous? Rusty, the dog who had waited for so long, was about to learn the truth. A truth that had been hidden for far too long. The train whistle echoed through the quiet valley. For the first time in years, Rusty felt the pulse of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Anticipation. The long, empty tracks before him were no longer barren. They were alive and the train was coming. But what would it bring? Was it the answers he had been waiting for? The answers Walter had promised? The answers Mrs. Cartwright had begun to piece together? Or was it something far more dangerous? Something that would shatter the fragile peace that had settled over Pinebrook? Mrs. Cartwright had barely begun to understand the full weight of Walter's words. The train, it wasn't just a train. It was the key. The train had carried something once, something precious and hidden. But what? She had always thought of it as just another relic of the past, a part of Pinebrook's fading history. Now it felt like a warning. She had been poring over Walter's journals, hoping to find some clue about Tommy Weaver's involvement. She had a hunch, but no answers. Yet as she flipped through a particularly worn journal, one that seemed older than the others, her breath caught. There, in the margins, Walter had written something that stood out. The train will come, and with it, the truth will come alive. What did that mean? Rusty knew this was no ordinary train. He had felt its presence before in his bones. It wasn't just a mode of transportation. It was a symbol, a promise, a manifestation of something bigger than himself. And he was ready to face it, ready to face whatever truth it would bring with it. He stood tall, his paws planted firmly on the ground. As the train grew closer, the whistle grew louder, almost deafening, like a drumbeat heralding the arrival of something profound. The train came to a halt, its doors creaking open. But there was no one to greet it, no one but Rusty. As the train settled into place, the station seemed eerily silent. The only sound was the soft chuffing of the engine as the doors swung open. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, out of the shadows, a figure emerged. A man, tall and thin, with graying hair and a weathered face. Rusty's eyes locked onto him immediately, recognizing him before anyone else could. Tommy Weaver. The name had haunted Mrs. Cartwright for days. But now, seeing him in person, she realized something she hadn't before. He wasn't just part of Pinebrook's forgotten history. He had been a part of it all along. His presence, though quiet, held weight. The weight of years lost, of secrets kept. The man who had vanished into the shadows of Pinebrook's past had returned, and with him, so had the mystery. Rusty approached Tommy slowly, his head tilted in that familiar way dogs have when they sense something important. He didn't bark. He didn't run. He simply watched the man, as if waiting for the same thing Rusty had been waiting for all this time. The truth. Tommy crouched down slowly, meeting Rusty's gaze. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out to touch the dog's head. The connection between them was immediate, a bond forged in the past, one that neither man nor animal could deny. Mrs. Cartwright moved forward, her mind spinning with questions. What was Tommy doing here? Why had he come back? And more importantly, why had he never told her, or anyone, the full story? As she reached Tommy and Rusty, the tension between them was palpable. There were words unsaid, history shared but never spoken. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Tommy spoke. I didn't mean to keep you in the dark, Grace. I had no choice. There are things about Walter, things I never told him, things I could never tell you. I was afraid. Grace looked at him, her eyes full of questions. Afraid of what? Of the truth, Tommy replied, his voice barely a whisper. I'm here to make things right, to finally explain. The truth Tommy Weaver was about to reveal had been buried for decades. It was a truth that had been hidden in plain sight, wrapped up in the memories of a train station, a dog, and an old promise. The moment had finally come for all the secrets to be laid bare. But even now, as the truth began to surface, there was still so much left unanswered. What had Tommy been hiding all these years? And what did Rusty really know about the mystery of the train station? The answers were close, but would they be enough to finally put the past to rest? The air around Pinebrook felt charged, as though something ancient and untold had just been stirred. The truth was slowly unraveling, thread by thread, but every answer only seemed to lead to more questions. The town's quiet facade was starting to crack, revealing the darkness it had long hidden. A darkness tied to the train, to Rusty, and to Tommy Weaver himself. For years, no one had questioned the history of Pinebrook's old station. People had moved on and life had continued. But now, standing at the crossroads of the past and present, Grace Cartwright could feel it. The weight of a forgotten history that was about to resurface in a way no one had anticipated. Tommy's return had been the first piece of the puzzle, but Grace knew it wasn't enough. She had heard enough to understand that Pinebrook's history was far from simple. And Tommy, though a part of it, wasn't the only one who held the answers. She could see it in his eyes, the hesitation, the guilt. There was more to the story. There had to be. She studied the map, tracing the red circle around the station. It was where everything had begun, and where it would end. Tommy was right. There was something more, something hidden just beneath the surface of Pinebrook's quiet streets, and it was waiting to be uncovered. Grace, there's something I never told you about the train, about the night it disappeared. Grace's heart skips a beat. She leans in, her eyes locked onto Tommy. What do you mean? She asks, her voice barely a whisper, as if afraid of what she might hear next. It wasn't just a train. It was carrying something. Someone who was supposed to disappear. Rusty's behavior hadn't changed since the train arrived, but now, something was different. His instinct, sharpened through years of loyalty, had detected something in the air. A signal, a presence that was both familiar and unsettling. Whatever had been buried in Pinebrook's past, Rusty was sensing it long before anyone else could. The figure coming down the road was no stranger to Tommy. It was a ghost from his past, someone who had disappeared years ago, someone who had once been a part of the story Grace and Tommy were now unraveling. The figure's silhouette grew clearer, revealing a tall, thin man whose face was as unfamiliar as it was haunting. For a moment, Tommy froze. The truth was about to be laid bare, and with it, the arrival of a new player, someone who had been hiding in plain sight. The man stepped into the light, and Grace could see it. His eyes. Eyes that carried the same secrets Tommy had buried for years. This man wasn't just part of the past. He was the key to unlocking everything they had been searching for. "Who are you?" Grace asked, her voice steady but her heart racing with anticipation. The man smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I think you know," he said, his voice low, almost too calm. The stranger's presence was like a match to a powder keg. Tommy knew him, and worse, the man knew Tommy's secrets. Secrets that, if revealed, could destroy everything. The weight of the past had just become unbearable, and Tommy knew the time for running was over. Grace looked at Tommy, her confusion turning to understanding. The pieces were falling into place, but they were falling fast, and soon everything would be too much to keep buried. Who was this man? What had he come to Pinebrook for? And what did he know that Tommy had been trying so desperately to hide? The answers were within reach, but the truth, as always, came at a cost. The mystery was unraveling faster than anyone could have imagined. But with every answer, the consequences of the past became more terrifying. Grace, Tommy, and Rusty were about to face a reckoning that would shake Pinebrook to its very core. The train station, once a symbol of routine and quiet days in Pinebrook, now stood as a place of reckoning. Secrets that had been buried for decades were rising to the surface, and the ghosts of the past were no longer content to remain silent. Rusty, Tommy, and Grace were caught in the web of those secrets, and there was no turning back now. Tommy Weaver had never wanted this confrontation, but now that the stranger had arrived, there was no escape. The truth would come out, and the consequences, well, they were more than Tommy could have ever imagined. "What do you want from me?" Tommy's words tremble as he faces the man he thought was gone from his life forever. "I've been trying to move on, trying to forget." "Why are you here now?" The man's smile doesn't reach his eyes. "You know exactly why I'm here, Tommy. You've been running from the truth for too long. It's time to face what you did, what we all did." The man beside him had been Tommy's mentor, his guide, the person he trusted more than anyone. But that trust had been shattered on the night the train disappeared, the night everything changed. The suitcase. It wasn't just a suitcase. It held something far more dangerous. A secret that would tear Pinebrook apart if it ever got out. "We have to do this," the man had said, his voice low and insistent. "We don't have a choice." But there was always a choice. Tommy just hadn't known it back then. The truth was too much to carry alone. But now, with the stranger standing before him, the weight of the past was too heavy to ignore. "Tommy, what is he talking about? What did you do?" Her voice is quiet, almost afraid to ask. But she has to know. She has to understand what happened all those years ago that led to this moment, this confrontation. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was wrong." Tommy's voice cracks. "I helped him. I didn't know how deep it went. I didn't know the cost." "You never asked the right questions, Tommy. You never wanted to know the truth because it would have destroyed you. But it's too late now. The truth is out there, and it's coming for all of us." Rusty's behavior spoke volumes. The dog, loyal and intuitive, had sensed the danger long before anyone else. It wasn't just the man. It was the culmination of everything that had been set into motion the moment the train had vanished all those years ago. The past wasn't just a memory. It was alive, and it was coming for them. "You thought you could hide from this town's history, Tommy. But Pinebrook remembers. And I remember, too." Tommy's face pales. The weight of the man's words crashes into him like a wave. He had known this day was coming, but he had never been prepared for the truth to come out like this. Tommy's voice, filled with regret. "What do you want from me?" Tommy repeats, his voice cracking under the pressure. "You've come all this way just to finish what you started? Is that it?" The stranger's voice. "It's not just about me. It's about everything. It's about Pinebrook's secrets. It's about the train, the suitcase, the people we lost, the people you betrayed. I didn't know who was on that train. I didn't know the lives that were about to be destroyed. Tommy, you didn't know, but you have to face it now. We have to face it, You can't keep running. I'm not running anymore. The truth had been a long time coming. And now it was here. Rusty, the ever-watchful guardian, seemed to sense that the final pieces were falling into place. The man, the suitcase, the train. It was all connected, and the mystery of Pinebrook's past was finally ready to be revealed in full. Tommy had taken the first step toward redemption, but the road ahead was long and fraught with danger. The secrets of the past were far from being put to rest, and what they uncovered next would change everything for good. The truth was no longer a distant memory. It was alive, breathing in the air around them, pressing in on every corner of Pinebrook. Tommy could feel the weight of it on his shoulders, like a storm that had been gathering for years, and now it was here, ready to burst. Grace's gaze flickers between Tommy and the stranger, her mind racing as she tries to piece together the fragments of the story she never knew. The man standing before them wasn't just a stranger. He was the key to everything, the keeper of Pinebrook's darkest secrets. Tommy's voice, steady. I can't undo what's been done, but I can make sure the truth doesn't stay buried any longer. His voice is calm, but there's an underlying strength in it, a strength that had been forged over years of guilt and regret. Tommy wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Pinebrook, for the people who had been left in the dark, and for the ones who had been hurt by his choices. Tommy's voice, tormented. I didn't know what was inside that suitcase. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I helped him. I didn't question him. I trusted him. Tommy's voice, regretful. That was the biggest mistake of my life. Grace's voice. Tommy, you don't have to carry this burden alone. We're in this together now. Tommy's voice, weary. But I don't know if I can fix this, Grace. The damage is done. The people we've lost. Grace's voice, resolute. You can't change the past, but you can change what happens next. You can make it right. We can make it right. The stranger's voice, cold. You think you can just walk away from this? The past doesn't forget. And neither do I. His tone sends a chill down Tommy's spine. The stranger wasn't done yet. He had his own plan, and it didn't involve redemption. It never had. Rusty was more than just a dog. He was Tommy's reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was still loyalty, still hope, and he wasn't going to let anything happen to the people he loved. You think you can make it right? It's too late for that, Tommy. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. The stranger's voice, menacing. You think you can make it right? It's too late for that, Tommy. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Tommy's voice, unwavering. I'm done waiting. The truth's out, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. Tommy's voice, horrified. I didn't know. I didn't know what was in that suitcase. But when I saw the girl's picture, it all made sense. This wasn't just about money. This was about something far darker. And I was a part of it. Tommy's voice, determined. I've lived with the guilt long enough. I can't change what happened, but I can stop the cycle. I can make sure no one else gets hurt. You think you can stop me? You don't even know who you're dealing with. Pinebrook has been mine to control for far too long. Grace defiantly said. Not anymore. The pieces were all in place. The past, the present, and the future of Pinebrook. They were all about to collide. And when the dust settled, nothing would ever be the same again. The truth had been revealed, but with it came a price. Now it was time for Tommy, Grace, and the rest of Pinebrook to pay that price. And in the end, the question remained. Was it too late for redemption, or had the damage already been done? This is it. The final chance. The last shot to make it right. Tommy stood at the edge of the train tracks, where it all began. His heart raced, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He had spent years running from the truth, hiding from the consequences of his decisions. But now there was no more running. There was only facing the reality that he had helped create, one action at a time. The stranger had arrived to bring everything to light, and now Tommy had to decide whether he would fight for redemption or let everything fall apart. Grace's voice, resolute. We've fought too hard for this town, Tommy. We can't let it all be destroyed now. Grace's voice was steady. but Tommy could hear the underlying fear in it, a fear of losing everything she had worked so hard to build. The town, the memories, the people they had come to protect. The weight of that fear pressed down on Tommy's chest, making the air around him feel thick and suffocating. But there was something else, too, something stronger than fear. A sense of purpose that had begun to grow within him, pushing him forward when every instinct wanted to run. I never thought I'd be here, standing at the edge of everything I once wanted to forget. I came to Pinebrook to escape, but I've learned that you can't outrun your past. No matter how far you run, it always catches up to you. You still don't get it, do you? Pinebrook was never about redemption. It was always about control. And I was the one in control. The stranger's voice sent a shiver down Tommy's spine. The man was delusional, convinced that he had orchestrated everything, that he had been the mastermind behind Pinebrook's hidden truths. But Tommy wasn't afraid anymore. He had come to terms with what he had done, and he was done hiding. You think you control this town? You think you can just walk in and make everything your own? Well, not anymore. This town belongs to the people, and I'm done letting you pull the strings. Tommy's voice, steely. The past doesn't own me anymore, and it doesn't own this town. Grace's voice, soft but firm. You can't break us. We've faced our demons. We've faced the truth, and we're still standing. The stranger's voice, furious. You think you've won? You think this is over? You have no idea what's coming next. Tommy, it's over. This town isn't yours to control anymore. You're just a footnote in a story that's already been written. Tommy's voice, quiet but determined. I'll make it right, no matter what it takes. The stranger's voice, sneering. You really think you've won, don't you? You're nothing more than a man trying to fix his mistakes. But mistakes like these, they don't go away. Grace's voice, unwavering. Some mistakes can't be undone. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. The battle for Pinebrook had come to its final moments. Secrets had been revealed. The past had been dragged into the light. And now there was nothing left to do but face the consequences, and hope that, in the end, redemption was still possible. In the end, the town would remember Pinebrook's darkest hour, and the courage it took to confront it. Tommy had faced his past, and he had chosen to stand for something greater. But in the quiet aftermath, the question remained, what would become of the town now? And would the shadow of the stranger's threat ever truly fade?